And one thing which was kind of shocking to me was to hear that Lake Antoine, the river, the water quality in that river is no longer suitable, I guess for drinking, because I'm assuming because of all the inputs from the agriculture, the intensive agriculture around that area. So I was very, shocked to read that report and read that, because again, I was under the impression that, NOASA is sort of responsible for all surface water management of the country. So, when it comes to rivers and lakes and things like that, there should be some oversight in terms of what's happening around them. To your question, yeah, the watersheds are incredibly important in Grenada. We're looking at, the protected Grenadian National Rainforest being one of our most important ones. And we could see the reports on social media in terms of how low actually the Grenadian Lake is actually this year in terms of the drought. I've done a lot of work in the watersheds above Grenville. So again, we're looking at the watersheds extending high up into the forested areas, where in fact there are many farmers relying on some of the small rivers and things in those areas, which basically join multiple tributaries, form bigger rivers, and come down into the sea. So really, we kind of need to protect all of the watershed areas. There are many activities which are unregulated in these areas in terms of point sources of pollution, in terms of pig farms. I think the young man who was supposed to come on the program was highlighting the issue of pig farms in certain areas of the country. Illegal dumping is a big problem as well. You mentioned that in the beginning of the program. Sometimes these are, located directly in watershed areas and river areas and river banks. Sometimes we still have the big problem of people washing their vehicles, or sometimes concrete trucks driving right into the river and washing their drums out into the river. So all these things are affecting the health of the watersheds, all the species that live in the rivers as well. And of course, that affects anybody in the coastal areas where all the water flows down to. I think, yeah, from the Grenada Land Actors side, one of the biggest problems we've seen, and one of our biggest concerns in terms of the unsustainable development, is how these big developments are catering for the massive water footprint that they have or are planned to have. We actually had put out a press release in May about our concerns in terms of what was going on in Watersheds and the fact that water restrictions were in place, but it appeared that hotels were still routinely watering their plants, and I suppose filling their pools. We actually heard from residents in Watersheds that they were not getting water, and they saw all these activities still happening at the hotels. The other thing is, when we looked at the hotels, and again through the court case that GLA has started and it's ongoing, we looked closely at the environmental impact assessments for the three biggest developments that we're challenging at Levera, Watersheds, and Mount Hartman. And in many cases, there are lots of questions in terms of how they're actually going to be supplying their own water sources. For example, in Levera, there's a massive golf course which has already started, and that will have a humongous footprint. We actually attended a consultation in Levera, I think it was early last year, where the developer said that they plan to actually water that golf course using the water from the Levera pond. Again, how could that be sustainable? It's a Ramsar site. One of the last things we actually saw disclosed in the court case was through the Physical Plan Development Authority, they were actually asking the Levera developers to develop a new environmental impact assessment specifically for a desalination plant. Because again, how are they getting water in such a water scarce area? They proposed to have a desalination plant, but we see nothing in terms of a new EIA or even understanding the impacts that would have on such an important area, especially for turtle nesting. And again, we're seeing similar issues in the other developments as well. I think, as Mr. Smith was saying, I think sometimes, NOASA is very focused on the upper watershed areas where they are abstracting from, where they have their dams and things like that. But I think, there really needs to be a much bigger oversight in terms of the entire watershed. And I know that NOASA is looking at legislation and things like that. Well, not NOASA, in terms of legislation for the whole water resources management of the country. But yeah, as you go, downstream from those locations, you have farmers basically using water directly from the river. So again, what is the quality of the water that they have? You have lots of point sources of pollution. You have things like pig farms scattered all over the country, in many cases on the riverbanks. I've seen this in the Bushesju area, and we recently became aware of one in the La Mode area. Yes. And we actually, the gentleman who was supposed to be on your show, we actually went out and spoke to him and visited that community. And speaking to the people there, they don't want to reuse the river. They don't trust the river, and this is a basin where a community used to use to actually bathe, where children would go and play. And they are not, confident in the quality of their water based on what's happening around it in terms of pig farms, in terms of agriculture and things like that. So this is a major problem. in terms of safety, of public health, from everything from fishing to recreation, like you said. So again, we have basically what it comes down is to basically zoning of a lot of activities, including agricultural activities. In fact, I recently read a draft report by a water expert in the region, Adrian Cashman, which listed a lot of information on the water resources in Grenada. And one thing which was kind of shocking to me was to hear that Lake Antoine, the river, the water quality in that river is no longer suitable, I guess for drinking, because I'm assuming because of all the inputs from the agriculture, the intensive agriculture around that area. So I was very, shocked to read that report and read that because again, I was under the impression that, NOASA is sort of responsible for all surface water management of the country. So, when it comes to rivers and lakes and things like that, there should be some oversight in terms of what's happening around them. And then lastly, there was mention of groundwater as well. I think that's become, even more important to think about, especially in terms of drought and other sources we may have to rely on. And again, we have historical wells in the Mount Hartman area. But how does that play in terms of massive billion-dollar developments happening in that direct area? How are they going to impact on those wells when we have things like climate change and saltwater infiltration threatening these coastal wells already? And in fact, that particular well in multiple resources and reports is listed as being important for the Grenada dove. So even the survival of one of our most endangered species relies on freshwater sources like this being maintained and being kept healthy and clear. And then farmers in that area also would use that water as well. So kind of, just touching on what everybody said. And the problems are really throughout the entire watershed and requires a watershed level effort and community effort to tackle these issues as well.
Mr. Smith, anything that Mr. Witzig articulated in respect of NOASA's management of bodies of water such as Lake Antoine?
Yeah, it would be remiss of me not to respond to that because, as Andre
Yes.
knows, while under the NOASA Act of 1990, NOASA is still responsible for all water resources in the state of Grenada. It is well known that NOASA has never had the resources to adequately manage, to monitor the proper use of these water resources, right? And it's largely for that reason, in addition to the fact that it is the modern approach to sound water resources management. There is an initiative afoot. It's being promoted by the G-Cruise project, well known, the Grenada Climate Resilient Water System, the G-Cruise project, that NOASA has been implementing for the last 2 years and will continue to implement to the end of 2025. And that is the creation, the separation of responsibility for water resources management from water services provision, which is what NOASA primarily has done and does over the years, and create a water resources management unit that would be adequately staffed and resourced to be able to properly manage Grenada's water resources. So yes, he's not incorrect, but NOASA has never had the wherewithal, the infrastructure, the resources, and so to be able to monitor all the water bodies in the country, Grenada's water resources. What I can say though, that being said, we are going to be moving very shortly to take measures to protect under the existing legislation and until the water resources unit comes into existence. We will be taking measures to through the NOASA Act to protect our key at-risk watersheds. So while I referred earlier to say that, well, the illegal dumping sites are not such a threat because our sources are upstream, there are a few instances where, it's a couple of months ago, one of the tour and hiking outfits in Grenada quite proudly displayed on the social media site, people bathing in a pond or a little waterfall and pond that is just upstream the intake of the, I think it's the Mamacan water treatment plant. And that not ought not to be the case. There are many other riverine sites and so on that can be used for recreational purposes, but humans ought not to be bathing in close proximity to the intake for drinking water treatment plant. For obvious reasons, there may be pathogens and so on introduced into the water that our slow sand filtration, sedimentation, slow sand filtration, and chlorination treatment barriers will not be able to remove, and we may be setting up ourselves for problems in our drinking water quality. So this is an initiative we'll be moving on hopefully very shortly.
Hi everyone, thanks for checking out the Bud Report's social media pages. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch our weekly live show, follow our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can catch repeat episodes on Wednesdays at 4 and 5 p.m. respectively on CRFM Radio and GBN TV in Grenada. We are also viewed on Sundays at 8 p.m. on WPG 10 throughout the Caribbean. Thanks for watching.